Hello again, everyone. My name is David LeBlanc, host of the Self-Sufficient You community. We are an online community based here in Canada for like-minded people who are coming together to learn, share, connect, and prosper on journeys towards increased choice, independence, and personal fulfillment. A big part of being more resilient and self-sufficient is having good health and wellness, particularly preventing illness and disease. And the quality of our water, the water we drink at home, at the office, or even just out and about, plays a huge role in all of this. So I'm very pleased once again to be chatting with Mario DiFranco, president of Purahome, based in St. Catharines. Good morning, Mario.
David, good morning. Nice to see you again.
It's always great to talk with you, and especially in our video conversation series talking about air and water and EMF protection and earthing, and today we're going to be talking about water. So let's dive right in. I'm going to ask you, why is the quality of our water so important these days?
Thank you. And maybe even a better question is, how do we protect ourselves against what's going on in the world with our water? And I'll do my best to address that in the time that we have. And the first stat that jumps out, David, is from the Environmental Water Group, where since 2019 numbers to now, there's been a 20% increase in known contaminants in water. So that's scary. That's a red flag. So now we know, confirmed, in looking at over 50,000 water distribution systems in North America, we know that there's 320 minimum known toxins in our city water. So when you pour that cup of water, that's what we can expect. 320 toxins known. That's just what's known, which tells me obviously there's a lot more that's unknown. So
I'm kind of surprised by that a little bit, Mario, because especially in Ontario, we've always heard or been told that we have some of the best municipal water in North America and maybe even the world, where it's very, very safe. It's like above standards in some cases. So how do we reconcile maybe what we're being told and maybe what the science is?
Yeah, thank you. The reality is you are responsible for your own family, your own health, and I mean, that's kind of what Purahome is all about. We did the research to share with people so that they don't have to try to decipher what's fact and what's not. We're going to talk about all that. We'll talk about maximum contaminant levels that the government has set. Where we are blessed is that here in Ontario, the majority of our water has a nice amount of minerals in it. As we go out west in Canada, that's not necessarily the case. And having minerals in your water is critical, as you'll see as we get through this. So in getting started, then let's understand this, that there are two characteristics of water that are very important. And I find our water industry, most companies, it's very archaic. It needs a kick in the pants. They just focus on what's in the water. Well, we also need to look at the structure of water. So those are the two characteristics that are super important. What are the toxins in our water? How do we get them out? What do we do with the minerals? And what has happened to the structure of my water? How is the water organized? What's its energy level? Because in a sense, our cells rely on frequencies and energy. So we're going to talk about that as well. So if we break this down, we can take any contaminant in water, David, and break it into two categories: chemical or bioburden or microorganisms, right? So if we talk about bacteria, parasites, viruses, those are microorganisms. Chemicals, we can break down into like 5 or 6 key categories. We'll talk about this. I'll try to show a diagram of how our water gets treated, but the first chemical that comes to mind is disinfectants. That's where chlorine is put into our water. We'll talk about that. The problem with chlorine is it creates the second class of toxins, David. And these are probably the biggest cancer-causing agents in our water. They're called disinfection byproducts, or DIBs. Other things to consider, inorganics. So when we talk about lead, heavy metals, those are inorganic. Fourth toxin would be organics. So I'm not talking about organic food. Organic by the true sense, the chemical definition, organic means a substance that contains carbon, hydrogen, or oxygen. Gasoline is 100% organic because that's what gasoline is. It's a carbon chain with hydrogens and oxygens attached to it. We don't want organics in our water. And then you've got the new toxins, the forever chemicals. These are called PFAs, polyfluorinated alkyl substances. And if we just quickly summarize that, that sounds scary, but per means two, poly means more than two. Fluoro, or F, stands for fluoride. A stands for alkyl. This is just carbon. So these forever chemicals have two or more fluorides attached to a carbon substance, and it's super persistent. These are the most persistent environmental chemicals to date. The forever chemicals represent over 9,000 toxins that's in our environment and thereby now in our water. We're going to talk about these in a little bit more detail shortly.
So just for those who may not be aware of what, because I've heard the term more and more these days, forever chemicals. Maybe briefly explain, what is a forever chemical?
So they're synthetic. They're very synthetic, and they have been found in the blood and breast milk of people and wildlife all over the world. And to date, and this was my next point, is they're essentially unregulated. Like, we regulate lead, and things are changing slowly, which is good news. I'll share some information on that. But forever chemicals are very persistent. They're used in a lot of products, and unfortunately, they end up in our environment and they just don't disappear, and they're toxic. They're very toxic. So they end up in our bloodstream. It's almost like DDT, which we'll talk about briefly, from the 40s, that we're still detecting even in polar bears up in the Arctic. So yeah. So those are the 5 or 6 key categories that we want to talk about and address. In the Environmental Defense Group, very beautiful research. Their report that they did was called The Toxic Nation because of the studies. And essentially, they went all across Canada, and regardless of age, what you did for a living, or where you were, every single person in the study had, on average, at least 44 toxins found in their blood work. So again, that brings the question up, is not am I toxic, but how toxic am I? So let's dive into then our water supply, and the facts, the price you pay for not doing anything about your water. And I'll talk about some unfortunate disasters, and they're going to continue to happen. And then we'll talk about just human lifestyle. You know, these are the pesticides we spray on our lawn, on our gardens. We'll talk about that. I'll quickly start then. Again, I shake my head. Like, so I'll start with East Palestine, which just happened this year. 5 of the cars that derailed contained vinyl chloride, which is the core substance for a polymer and a potential carcinogen. 11 of the 38 cars contained hazardous materials. And one of the key things that I got out of this was their testing showed that the water and air were okay, but the way environmental science works is, okay, that's fine. And part of what I did in my university thesis was I saw that these toxins are super hard to detect. They were hiding on me. They were disappearing, even though they were still in my flasks. They were not easy to detect. And one environmental science scientist did say that you cannot make that judgment right now. It's going to take 6 to 12 months to know how contaminated their water supply is in Ohio, right? And that's what I really want to share here. Chemical spills are everywhere, right? Even Even hospitals, if you just think about it, they are allowed to dump blood byproducts, and how many degreasers and solvents end up down the drain. This happens all the time. More tragic than East Palestine, Ohio, Dave, was Flint, Michigan. This was 2014, and just this does deserve a minute of our time. In order to save money, what happened there was the city manager decided to switch the water supply from Detroit to the nearby Flint River. And what they neglected to realize was that the Flint River water had 8 times more minerals or salt in it, which makes it very corrosive. Plus, what happened too is a lot of untreated manufacturing waste was getting dumped into the Flint River. So when they made the switch, what happened was people started complaining and showing up at City Hall with colored samples of water and that they weren't feeling good. The municipality said our water's testing fine. Shortly right after, there was a Legionnaire's outbreak and 12 people died. And then because of that, then you test the water for bacteria. And sure enough, they found fecal coliform in the water. Well, what do you do when you find feces in your water? Well, you increase chlorination. Okay, so now I'm adding a disinfectant that's going to create these chemical byproducts, these disinfection byproducts. And it increased how corrosive this water was. So it has 8 times more salt. I'm increasing the chlorine. The water is way more corrosive. It's got far more disinfection byproducts. And it attacked the coating on the plumbing, so that lead started leaching into the water.
It's like bad after bad after bad.
We've got a disaster.
Yeah.
So I'll just summarize. The pediatrician in Flint, Dr. Hannah Atisha, in grabbing blood samples from the children, and this is what breaks my heart. So for that 18-month period, she was basically seeing 2 to 3 times the amount of lead concentration in blood work of her little children. And that's just awful. We'll talk about lead. Lead retards blood cell development, brain cell function. It's devastating to the development of a human being. So that's what happened in Flint. It was a disaster. Here in Niagara, we'll just quickly talk about Love Canal. I'm about 20 minutes from Love Canal in Niagara Falls, New York. That was 21,000 tons of toxic waste buried. An accidental chemical, hooker chemical. They reported it. They sold the property to a school board, I believe, and for $1. So they legally tried to do things by the book, and they disclosed what had happened. But unfortunately, with heavy rains and activity and putting property up, the chemicals leaked, and then they ended up getting sued. And again, that was another disaster. So these are just some of the things that have happened in the past. Will these types of events happen in the future? Absolutely.
And these events are not, they're not elsewhere. Those 2 specific examples that you mentioned, I mean, they're in your particular backyard in Southern Ontario. Flint, Michigan is not too far across the border. And Love Canal is in, just northern Ohio, isn't it? Near Cleveland, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, so this is not something that's happening in a third world somewhere. This is happening in our backyard.
Yeah, sorry, Love Canal is in Niagara Falls, New York. I get there in 15 minutes, that subdivision. A lot of people actually go there for eating out. What scares me is as we rely more on artificial intelligence, automation, in talking to people like pilots, and you look at the number of air traffic disasters, our human capacity to respond to a disaster is on the decline, right? And a lot of people with hazmat training are even saying that how East Palestine was handled was done incorrectly, and the result is more environmental contamination. So having said that, you have to take your family's health into your own hands. I believe that wholeheartedly. We haven't even talked about Walkerton, where 7 people died.
Yeah.
If we look at human lifestyle, I really respect Dr. Kelly Reynolds out of the University of Arizona, a lot of environmental research. And anything I share on the United States, just take that number and divide it by 10 and you get the research for Canada. So US agricultural land, over 840 million pounds of pesticides applied annually. That ends up in our water system. So Canada, just divide that by 10, over 80 million pounds. Our lawns, 67 million pounds applied to our lawns in the United States, probably 7 million here in Canada. If we look at hazardous waste disposal sites, her research shows that just under half of over 30,000 of these abandoned hazardous waste sites are leading to groundwater contamination. The most recent event has been all the COVID vaccinations, and whether you're vaccinated or not, obviously billions of vaccinations have been made, and there's byproducts. And where does that end up? It ends up in our water at some point. So these are just some of the facts about what's going on in our water. Well, knowing all that, how do we treat our water? How do we get water from a lake and get it into our homes? Dave, I'm just going to quickly hold this up. It's not going to be legible, but I just kind of want you to see it. This represents a typical treatment layout, okay? And I'll briefly talk about it. First step is you intake the water and we inject it with chlorine. Why? To kill bacteria. Then we inject the water with alum, another chemical that contains aluminum. And aluminum obviously is, it's been linked to, again, neurodegenerative and cognitive function. The tox, like the small contaminants in our water flocculate, so they settle. It goes through a settling basin that gets scraped out. So now I've got water with less of these particles in it. It then goes through a layer of sand, gravel, and carbon. This isn't high-end filtration, it's filtration. And then what do? Well, then we inject the water with chlorine again. And depending on where we live, you may inject the water with fluoride, which is not a good thing. Fluoride is also a toxin. And then it goes into a contact tank to try to kill bacteria. And then we inject it with sulfur dioxide to reduce the amount of chlorine in it. And then the water gets pressurized and it goes through miles and miles and miles and miles of pipe. And this is a big problem. And it's the next fact that we talk about. We literally have an aging infrastructure here, and this is maybe the biggest threat to our drinking water. Here in Niagara, Hamilton, I know for sure 30 to 40% of all the water that's treated at the treatment plant, right? And that's easy to measure. They have meters. If you take everybody's water meter, Dave, and add it up, it doesn't add up to what's at the treatment plant. We're short by 30 to 40%. That means water is escaping the distribution system. It's not sealed and contaminants come in.
Yeah.
Okay?
I know here in Ottawa, we've had a big problem over the past, I don't know, I think it's been 10, 15 years that because the city's grown so much and the infrastructure it hasn't kept up. When we get a good rainstorm, the catch basins and all that,
Yes.
the treatment plant can't handle everything. So there's a significant amount of discharge that goes right into the Ottawa River every time. And it's well known, it's public knowledge.
Absolutely. And one of our good customers, very bright man, he's an industrial hygienist. I respect him wholeheartedly. He goes fishing, he has a boat. And he just shared the same thing. He goes, Mari, he goes, you won't believe what we see floating. And they can't keep up, right? Heavy rains, they just discharge untreated sewage into our lakes. And that leads to other problems. So if we then talk specifically about toxins, I'll ask you a quick question. And this is how I like to introduce the next part of our presentation, if you will, or our talk is, most people, like if I grab a glass of water and, oh, I can smell something. They associate bad taste and odor with unhealthy water. Dave, the truth is most harmful contaminants are, and if I ask you to fill in the blank, do you have a word that you would use perhaps maybe?
The first word that comes to mind is odorless.
Oh, you're awesome. That is spot
Well, you
on.
kind of set me up for that a little bit. So it wasn't that hard.
You were listening, my friend.
I was listening.
The whole point then is you do not rely on your taste buds, you rely on science. And the first toxin we talk about is the one that you can smell, and that's chlorine. And I'll just summarize this. This was the United States Council on Environmental Quality. The simple act of people who drink chlorinated water, they have a 93% greater risk of developing cancer than those who do not. And we'll leave it right there for chlorine. Now you can decide, do I want chlorine in my water? What does chlorine lead to when we put it into water? It leads to disinfection byproducts. And these are compounds called THMs, trihalomethanes. Chloroform is the simplest one of them. If you remember the black and white movies, there was that bottle of chloroform on the shelf, and then you put it on a rag, yes. And then you knock somebody out. This is probably our biggest cancer-causing agent in our water is chloroform. Anyone on city water is being exposed to chloroform. It is that simple. I know here in Niagara, if you look at the before treatment and after treatment, so before chlorine injection, after chlorine, because chlorine splits apart, CO2, I got these crazy chlorine atoms, they attach to organics, and now I've got chloroform and other disinfection byproducts. The one testing sample I just pulled up, the chloroform concentration went up over 130 times by them chlorinating water. Halifax in Nova Scotia, they withdrew blood before and after people bathing. And as a result of that, I believe it was a 400% increase in chloroform in blood. They just issued a warning to all their 11 communities, do not bathe for a long time. Simple as that. So we talked about how these substances greatly increase the risk of cancer. And we talked about in air, how we have a cancer crisis in Canada and North America. The next compound we talk about is VOCs. David, have you heard of a VOC before?
Volatile organic compounds.
You're the best. SOCs are similar to VOCs. VOCs, correct, they evaporate. So if somebody wears cologne or perfume, you can smell it 10 feet behind. That's very volatile. Synthetic organics do not evaporate as much. They tend to persist longer. These are things like pesticides, herbicides. They're more of the synthetic organics that persist. Cleaning products are more volatile. Degreasers and things like that. Our exposure to them in city water greatly increases risk of cancer, depresses our immune systems. Heart disease is very prevalent with increased exposure to these organics. The next one that's dear to my heart, especially here in Niagara, nitrates. Nitrates come from fertilizer runoff, vegetative decay. They impact the amount of oxygen our blood cells can carry as they travel through the body. So that leads to a higher number of miscarriages. And here in Niagara, Dave, we have one of the worst miscarriage rates in all of Canada. Fetal development's impacted by exposure to nitrates in our water. As I drink my water, sorry.
Yeah, but you're not drinking from the tap. We'll talk about that in a minute.
Yes, thank you. Heavy metals are a big concern. These are probably one of the top two issues, I think, with our water. Lead is the most common heavy metal in our water. And again, I just think of Flint, Michigan, what a disaster. Yeah. We did a newsletter about 2 years ago, and there was a report, and good for these reporters for speaking the truth. And one of them actually worked for Mainstream. And, you know, it was refreshing to see the truth come out in this case. And they provided a website, and we included the link in our newsletter. And you know, I was kind of curious. I went to the website, and my wife was pregnant at this time. And I went during where she worked, which school, and one of the water fountains where she worked in her school, wow, she was probably about 6 months pregnant at the time. It had over 100 times the maximum contaminant level of lead suggested in our water for safety. So if she would have drank that, like my baby girl would have been, like she would have been absolutely compromised. Her health would have been different without a doubt.
Yeah, just think, you know, if it's at an elementary school and you stay at that, well, I guess any school, because every school is probably about the same. You know, you're 6 years or 7 years if you're in 4-year-old kindergarten, 7 years at that same school. And let's say you took a sip from that fountain once or twice a day for 7 years. That's quite the buildup in your system. At such a young, tender age when your body is, you know, not capable of, you know, fighting that.
Yeah.
invasion off necessarily, right?
And even adults, once lead goes in your body, it is super hard to get it out, and that's where you have to rely on it's called chelation to get it out of your body. It's not easy to do. Maybe we'll just talk quickly about one more toxin, and these are the emerging classes. And then, to do this justice, endocrine disruptors. What are endocrine disruptors? These are chemicals that once you reach that certain dose, they interfere with our hormones, our hormone systems, right? So now we're talking like thyroid, testes, parathyroid, pituitary. So they greatly increase risk of cancerous tumors, learning disabilities, birth defects, all these sexual development problems, right? Feminizing of males, masculine effects in females. And now we can mention DDT that was introduced in the 40s, PCBs, polychlorinated biphenyls from industrial coolants, bisphenol A, right, which is a plasticizer. And all that means, plasticizer means to make a plastic softer so you can mold it into a children's bottle that they sip from, or a food container, linings of metal and food cans. And then you get into the flame retardants as well, plastic cases that are everywhere now, carpets, flooring, phthalates for soft toys. These are all endocrine disruptors that end up in our water. And you just look at what's happening in society, and you can see the issues with what's happening with people. The largest wastewater treatment was just done in 2014, Dave. And I still remember reading the head scientist who was in charge was taken aback that they monitored, I think it was 58 drugs, and over half of the samples had more than 25 of these drugs. And the way this works, if I have a new drug that I want to put to market, I theorize how much of that ends up in our water system. I can say 5 parts per million. And 5 years later, if it's 40 parts per million or 100, there's no recourse, there's no action,
Right.
Nothing has to, I'm not going to redesign this drug. It's just where we're at. And the Mayo Clinic showed that it was 2007, 48% of North Americans were on one drug. That's up to 70% now. So we have to take care of what we're putting in our bodies. One of the studies, this was the British Medical Journal Open, it was crazy. So as you plot female oral contraception and male prostate cancer, from country to country, they were parallel. Mm. They followed one another, right? Cause and effect. And then again, the forever chemicals, they're just hard to filter. Those are the big toxins. Biological pathogens, there's cysts in Milwaukee in the 80s, over 100 people died from a cyst in their water. Walkerton, we had 7 people die from a bacteria. Flint, we had 12 people die from bacteria. And an important fact, and I believe this was Dr. Kelly Reynolds, but this one I always remember, and it's close to my heart. Oh, somebody says I'm not feeling good, I think I got mild food poisoning. I would challenge that a little bit and just say that we've learned that 1/3 of gastrointestinal illness is actually from city water, Dave. So keep that in mind.
And of course, most Canadians are urban. Most of us live in large cities and big towns, and most people are on municipal water. So the vast majority of Canadians are subjected to this context.
Amen. Right. Okay. Well, now the question is, what can I do?
Yeah, because I'm getting depressed. So uplift me with what we can do. Just before we get into that, I'm thinking about, the typical family or the typical person and their water source. Most people, I don't know the stats, but, some people drink right from the tap because they believe, because they've been told that their city water is safe. And, they think that bottled water is not the greatest. So they figure city water is better because at least has some minerals in it. Because bottled water is, there's not necessarily good things about that. So there's other people who just live on bottled water. They'll have a big Culligan, water tank in their living room, or they'll buy cases and cases of water, and they think that's a healthier choice. There's other people who have a well, who are lucky enough to have a well, and maybe or maybe not, it's doing them a service in terms of safety. And then there's other people, and now I'm probably talking about a really small minority, hopefully it's growing, who understand the threats of various water sources, and we'll get into this in a second, and who are doing something about it with proper filtration, like not just buying a Brita water container from Walmart and hoping and thinking that they're doing themselves a service, but a proper water filtration, either a standalone or a whole home or whatever kind of system it is. So, I think I've covered the vast majority of people from tap water to bottled water to well water. That's probably the main sources of most people.
Yeah, I think you've covered it. Absolutely. And if you just go whole spectrum, again, what do we do at this point? And this is where our government comes in. Why don't they eliminate all of these toxins? Well, practically they can't. Less than half of 1% of our treated water is ingested. So even if they're just thinking of money, it doesn't make sense in that regard. So what they did was, this is actually the facts. This is the true story. This is what caused our whole Safe Water Drinking Act. David, in the early 70s, people were dying of cancer in New Orleans. Unlike anywhere else in North America, government sends people, what's going on in New Orleans? They finally get smart and test the water. They find chloroform, that toxin we talked about, probably the biggest cancer-causing agent in our water, chloroform. People were exposed in New Orleans to very high levels of chloroform. Now the government sets up MCLs, maximum contaminant levels. So for lead, we say, okay, the maximum contaminant level for lead in your drinking water is 10 parts per billion. So a municipality then reports on that. We're in compliance with the maximum contaminant level. I know me personally, for my family, I want 0 parts per billion of lead, because if it goes in my body, it's hard to get it out. I want to protect the red blood cell development in my daughter. I don't want any lead in my water. So I'm going to kick this up a notch. So even having said all of this, and there's only about 90 contaminants regulated that are monitored. We know now that there's at least 300 in our water, so that's a shortfall. Good news is that the EPA last month did announce that they are going to they're going to propose a restriction on these forever chemicals, so that hopefully changes how industry makes products. Bottom line, 20% of North Americans are drinking unsafe water. That's from the National Resource Defense Council. So what do we do? And this now brings me to where I was 20 years ago when I had this research. My thesis was on analyzing cancer compounds in water. And I made that beautiful phone call to Dr. Martin Fox, the first person who wrote a book on healthy water. And he led me to research, and he shared beautiful things with me. It's very simple. There's 65 years of data, David, that show people who drink demineralized water are at greater risk of heart attack and stroke. So that tells us we have to have calcium, magnesium in our water. And at the time, well, there's 2 options. You mentioned like some carbon filters. Well, they will take out some toxins and definitely improve the taste, but there's still a significant amount of toxins in your water, along with the minerals, which we know are critical to health. Then I can get into the non-discriminatory systems, distillers, reverse osmosis systems that will take out heavy metals, leave some organic pollutants in, but in general, now my water is acidic. And the research shows you drink demineralized acidic water, you're increasing your risk of heart attack and stroke. So which one do you want? The one with minerals and toxins, or the one with less toxins, but now it's acidic?
How about neither? How about I choose neither?
Yeah, exactly. So I'll bypass the research on drinking demineralized water, and that's when we were led to a company that took NASA's research, millions of dollars of research, where essentially to keep someone in space alive, they urinate, they flush it, they drink it. Our technology is called Aqua Space. I fell in love with it as a chemist. I couldn't believe what I saw. It's a world first. It's a blend of ingredients that are enhanced. It's called charge modification, David, so that each ingredient, if it takes out this many toxins, it can take out more. And when you combine the right ingredients and cook it the right amount of time and in the right way, I have this beautiful recipe to take pretty much the majority of all the toxins we talked about out of your water. So Aquaspace is a NASA spinoff, and hence the name. One of the cool things that just happened, which was just verification, as a result of Flint, Michigan, a high-powered lobby group in Washington, D.C. of parents got together and pressed the schools. We want less than 1 parts per billion of lead in the water for our kids. And this was passed. And then what happened was, okay, what do we do? How do we get the water down to 1 part per billion of lead, which hasn't really been heard of? And I won't mention the other companies, but 2 very large companies that even had lead certified systems pulled right out. They didn't want their names to even be associated with this. Well, there was 18 months of testing, and the product that ended up in these 5,000, all these schools with like 5,000 water fountains or sinks to serve teachers and children, Aquaspace was the only product that can get the water to less than 1 part per billion of lead. Right, and that was affirmation for me, because we've been with Aquaspace for about 20 years. Phenomenal technology. Even if you remember the Exxon Valdez oil spill, that was just around 1990. We sent them, actually, Aquaspace sent them one of our carafes, which is just this part here, right? They poured that oil contaminated water through the filter, and it cleaned the water of all those like benzene, xylene, toluene, all these byproducts better than anything else that they tried. As a result, they got 10 large containers to the workers to help save the animals, the workers, and obviously help people. So we fell in love with this technology. It truly is whole spectrum, meaning lead is on one end of the toxic spectrum, David, because it's a charged salt, it's a mineral. Chloroform is on the other, the disinfection byproduct. It's organic, it's small. It carries a bit of a charge to it. And Aquaspace was essentially removing both above 99%, which means pretty much everything in between is filtered to that high standard while leaving minerals in the water.
That's the key, right? I mean, you could have a fantastic filtration system, but you want it to remove the bad and keep the good, which is the minerals, right? So that's the trick.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And then something that evolved probably about 8 years ago, we found that a second NASA spinoff technology, American made. It's essentially a microfiltration system. I don't have one here, but it takes out bacteria and parasites really well. And talking to their head chemist, potentially microplastics, spike proteins. And we were getting issues in Toronto like 8, 9 years ago where the drinking systems were clogging in order to take bacteria because they got very fine sediment because their distribution system is very poor. And customers were tired of the ceramic filter, which at the time was the most prevalent and best technology to protect people from bacteria. Well, we swapped out with the nanoceramic technology that relies on, again, electropositive charge, and these little like the micropores behave like ultra. Ultra is 1,000 times smaller than micro, and all our flow issues disappeared in Toronto. We don't get clogged water filtration systems. We can even do whole home with this to really protect people from what's going on in the environment. And it just, yeah, that was the next step for us. So now we've got Aquaspace for the chemical filtration. We got the nanoceramic technology for the microbiologicals. And when you pair the two, it's phenomenal, right? So we've got access to all these different products. If we have a couple of minutes, I can quickly show you, David.
Yeah, I'd love to see the products. And now, are both of those Aquaspace products, or are they different?
Yeah, thank you. Now everything here, the core is the aquaspace technology. And actually what I'll do, Dave, is just so you guys can see, I've got city water and aquaspace water here. I'm just gonna put in OTO, which is a very simple
It's nothing
test.
like good old St. Catharines city water. Mm.
Yeah. Okay, so now you can see aquaspace water. Can you
On the
see the
left,
difference?
yeah.
Yeah, this one here with city water, we're probably at 2 parts per million of chlorine, right? And again, that simple lack of dechlorinating your water reduces the risk of cancer. Okay, chlorine is actually very easy to filter. Very easy to filter. It's the chlorine byproducts that are hard, and that's where a simple carbon filter doesn't do the trick. Which I'll mention right now. We took out a system not far from here in Port Dalhousie, and the lady had 2 filters in her home, and they were identical, which is a no-no. You don't put 2 identical filters. You try to give people 2 technologies to remove more toxins. This is called a carbon block. I can buy something like this for $5 to $6, and it will dechlorinate your water. Now, water goes from the outside in. So it's going through about the thickness of my thumb. So even though this filter looks massive, that's the amount of filtration you're getting. Okay? It's plain Jane carbon. Here's our aquaspace drinking filter, and and it's granular. It's not made into a brick.
Right.
It's granular. It's poured in your. You don't hear it. Even how we fill it up is a patented process. Now it's encased, so the water can't go from the outside to the middle. It goes from the bottom to the top. So here's my thumb, and then another, and another, and another. Okay, you get it. Yeah. And this isn't plain Jane carbon. This is our aquaspace formula with probably 7 ingredients, all charge modified, to do everything from, again, heavy metals to chlorine byproducts to pharmaceuticals, pesticides, and herbicides, and leave the minerals in.
So that was a filter. It looks like a filter cartridge or something. So what does that get attached to? How does that get used? Okay, so that's a whole home system, right? Where you would install.
This is a drinking water system. So you can see here a 1/4-inch tube. We can go 3/8. So that will service 1 tap, maybe 2, depending on the type of home.
So for example, someone would put that, say, in their kitchen, most likely, right? That's a typical install underneath the kitchen faucet.
And this becomes your food prep. And this is important. One of the most powerful demos I ever saw. You fill your kitchen sink with city water, and just like we did this, now you can really see the yellow color.
Yeah, it's very obvious.
Okay. You put chlorine test drops in your sink, and it turns yellow. You get lettuce, chop it up, throw it in your sink. That yellow color disappears within 1 second. Where did the chlorine go? It went into your food. What does chlorine do? It splits and creates disinfection byproducts. Not healthy for food prep, right? So kitchen, if you do a drinking system, this isn't just drinking water. It's the water you boil your food in. It's the water you wash your salad with. Okay. Here is the whole home unit here that I'm pointing to. That's just one of like 3 or 4. Why would someone spend more money to do whole home when, all I want is drinking water? Well, our route of exposure to chloroform, again, the biggest cancer-causing agent in our water, and this is fact, is 600% greater from bathing than from drinking, because it evaporates, it's volatile. So you're inhaling it, and that Halifax study showed 400% increase in concentration in blood. Don't take a long shower, right? But when you have a whole home system like this, it's not just dechlorinating, it's also really trying to address as many of the disinfection byproducts as possible. And now it's nice to see, we ask every whole home client, are you growing a garden, like for tomatoes? Because this water is amazing. That's the second huge advantage. Do you want this water going to your garden? Knowing that chlorinated water, again, you're going to get those disinfection byproducts, right?
It makes sense, right? Because it's almost like when we talked about air, right? Well, you're just not going to have a purifier, for example, if you have, a 3-bedroom home, you're not going to put it, you're just not going to clean the air in 1 bedroom and then go stand in 2 other bedrooms that have dirty air. I mean, there's no point. So much like, I guess, with air, with water, I mean, it's great to have it, say, installed on your tap in the kitchen so you can drink from it and wash your vegetables. But if you're bathing or showering or using it in your garden, or other, I mean, you're not getting the full benefits, right? So you're either going to do it or you're not going to do it, right?
And I know budget comes into play. So if someone can budget it, absolutely, it's so worth doing whole home. One of the greatest moments in my life, I was almost 50, I was 49, and it was time for giving Sophia, our daughter, her first bath. And a very emotional moment for me. My wife hands her to me, and I'm lowering her into the tub for the first time in her life. And as corny as this is, I realized I was putting her in aqua space water, and I got emotional knowing that she was protected from all those disinfection byproducts. And yeah, just a special moment for me. And I wish that for everybody. There's something very special about this technology, this company. I wish I could tell you that I developed it. I did not. As a science person who's done a lot of research, I have fallen in love with it. And this company, Aquaspace, needs to be stewarded. As you can see what's happening to our environment, that's one of my greatest wishes, is that whatever happens in the future, 40 years from now, this technology, it's in way more homes and it's helping way more people. And the owner of the company is wonderful. I mean, we look at big picture. They're not a greedy company. They're an R&D company. And one of the things that, Michael, the owner of the company, has always shared with me is that he's promised all these he calls them the older women, who they buy the carafe because they're alone or they're a widow, right? What an amazing way to get that same technology. This filter lasts 1 year. It's not like a disposable and throw it away in 5 weeks. Like, this does 500 gallons of water at that high level.
Yeah, we actually have one of those. We bought it, I don't know, maybe 3 years ago, and I think we've only had to replace the filter once. And we drink quite a bit of water, so we got a lot of mileage out of that one filter.
It's exceptional. So what we have here then is the use of science. We know that we've got toxins in our water. We know that we have to take the toxins out. We have to leave the minerals in. And maybe just one other thing, Dave, that I really feel is worth 2 minutes of our time, if you don't mind. It's the vitalization, the structuring, or the microclustering of our water. So in Europe, where the water is higher quality than here, half of the people, they structure the water as opposed to filtering it. Okay. Structuring. And you know what? I'll do this. I've never done this. I'm just going to show this picture. Hopefully you can see it. You see those 2 dark pictures right
Move it
there?
a little. There you go. That's good. Move it a little to your right. That's better.
And I'm pointing to this picture here.
Yeah.
This is what distilled water looks like as it's about to get frozen. And this is much healthier water. 6-sided crystal. Okay.
Yeah, there's a huge difference in their shape. One is round and one, looks like a crystal or a star.
And that's based on structure. So picture, if I will, Dave, picture me as a water molecule. Here's oxygen, here's H and H, H2O. You can see that I'm H2O. And if I change my bond angle, which I just did, my quality changes. And now picture people as water molecules. We can form a group of 18 of us in a circle. That's a large cluster. What microclustering means is we take this group of 18 and let's break it down into something more natural that was in existence in our brooks, our streams, our rivers 1,000 years ago, probably a group of 6. And when you go freeze that water, you can picture that 6-sided crystal. If we take water that surrounds a human, a healthy human cell, we're going to see a 6-sided crystal. And if we take water that surrounds a cancer cell in our body, it's not 6-sided. And I cannot stress this enough. We have ways to structure water. This is the second part. And we started our talk today by saying there's 2 characteristics of water: composition, leave minerals in, get toxins out; 2, structure. Dave, we want this water to go into your cells to hydrate you and to take toxins out. When the clusters are large, it's harder to do that. Okay. Structuring, just very simply, you can see here, this is a structuring device right here. Okay, it's called aquatomic, not expensive, and through this beautifully applied magnetic field, the structure of the water is going to get revitalized. It's like recording music on a cassette tape.
Right.
You realign the ions, the molecules, the crystals in the cassette tape, you press play, you hear the frequencies. Water is designed to record information, right? And now with 5G coming, we hit water with chemicals, which pulls apart that bond angle. It hits 90-degree turns. Nothing in nature moves at 90 degrees. Streams meander.
Yeah.
These structures are water, and we need to now really consider what we've done to our water. The water that you and I drink, this has been flushed down a toilet. It was drank by dinosaurs. It's the same water. It's not new. It's recycled and recycled and recycled. So let's take the toxins out, leave the minerals in, microcluster the water so that it goes into my cells, nutrients in and toxins out. And that summarizes really what healthy water is right there.
I think that's a really good way to explain it. The whole home system, just want to be curious in terms of how much the prices are for your various systems. So you got a whole home, you have the, I guess the one in the middle was like an under counter one, and then you have the carafe. So what are the prices for each of those?
Yeah, thank you, David. So carafes start in the $90 range. Okay, and again, this is that same aquaspace technology that is really high quality. And depending if people have fluoride in their water, right, that's about $10 more. And then you go to potentially countertops. So for about in the $300 range, we can now include the nanoceram technology to take bacteria out of the water with fluoride or not, aquaspace. Drinking system installed. Now we're in the $600 to $800 range, depending on the model. Whole home units start in the $1,700 range. You know, and for the larger families, we've been doing some larger homes recently, like 4,000 square feet with 3 full baths and 5 people. Those systems are, I think, in the $2,500 to $2,600 range. Okay. Once you have a system, it's up to you. You change the filters, right? So the fluoride carafe, every 6 months, we give you a reminder, time to change that filter. The regular carafe is 12 months. Drinking filters, 12 months. The media in this whole home system here, it should last for 2 years. Why 2 years? And this is important, please understand. That will dechlorinate your water for 5 years, no problem. So will my socks, right? And I can offer you my socks for $3.
Sell.
Yeah, they will dechlorinate your water, but lead, pharmaceuticals, pesticides, herbicides are still in there. Lead and chloroform will start to break through around year 2. They're super hard to filter. And this technology does a really good job on them, Dave, for that. So the majority of our customers want their media changed at 2 years. And I'm one of them. I definitely change it at the 2-year mark for sure.
It could mean maybe you take one less vacation this year and you invest in a whole home system, or even the under the counter one, right? And it's an investment in your health.
It totally is, right? I don't know why I always think of granite countertops. I see how many people have granite countertops for $7,000-8,000, and sometimes they say, well, $700 is too much for a drinking system. You know, whatever it is, this is, for me, this is my priority. A whole home system, we break it down to annual, and it might be around $800 to change the media every 2 years. So now we tell everybody, can you budget $400, $1.30 a day or whatever that is for your bathing, cooking, drinking water? right? And it'll always be around that number, $1.30, $1.20, $1.60 to maintain the large system, right? The drinking systems, the annual filter kits are $160 up to $260, depending on the system. And you know, that's my priority, right? I'm protecting my family.
Yeah, and it's nice to see that regardless of your budget or maybe even your space requirements, you have items in various price ranges from the carafe, which is very affordable, which is, you know, you fill it up, it sits in your fridge, the under the counter one, and then right up to the whole home. So you have a product lineup for just about everyone's budget.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's the beauty of Aquaspace. It's not about bottom line. It literally is R&D to try to get this to as many people as possible. And I admire them for that. That's why we've been with them for over 20 years.
Mero, before we wrap up, I have one last question. I have a question from a self-sufficient new member, and she is very curious to know. She wanted me to ask you, what are the differences between structured water and alkaline through a CanGen machine?
Okay, thank you. So one way to make alkaline water, you know what, this is cool. Okay, let's do it. I wasn't going to show this, but this is going to answer the question. So these are pH drops, and then this will answer. So instead of chlorine, I'm testing for pH. And
is that just tap water there?
Thank you. Let's shake them and you'll see.
Is that tap water?
Nope. This one. Okay. Now this is the mirror image. I'll just go like this. Can you see the different colors?
Yeah, blue, green, and yellow.
Thank you. Yellow is the pH of reverse osmosis water. And here is yellow. You can see that yellow is acidic, pH 6.
Yeah.
Green, pH 7.5. This is Aquaspace water. We're lucky because we have minerals here in Ontario. This is blue. That's Aquaspace alkalized water. And this is kind of what your member is talking about. Now, that water was alkalized using minerals, not electricity. CanGen and other ionizers use electricity with plates. It's called electrolysis, and it splits the water into an acid component with excess hydrogen ions and an alkaline component with excess oxygen and hydrogen called hydroxyl. This is alkaline, this is acidic. I'm not a huge fan of electricity, right? And when people go near electricity, it's not good for our cell frequency. And thereby, I'm not a huge fan of using it on water. That will structure the water. Ionizers will definitely structure the water for sure. We know that. They're good at that. They're super expensive, and that's why you don't see them in our showroom. We can get an Aquaspace ionizing machine from Europe, but we would have to sell them for $2,600. We can do full home detoxification of your water for typically less money.
Right.
And we can still alkalize it using minerals. So we did a couple quick experiments. I know that the microclustering effect from ionizing will last about 24 hours. When we use minerals, it lasts much longer than that. So here is our aqua power joint. Now this is a microclustering device that's in the $500 range that can do your entire home. You just put it over your pipe. 40,000 healing frequencies. This is pure silver. There's even gold in here, blue to reduce the effects of EMFs. For a fraction of the cost of an ionizer, that's going to microcluster the water. And then to get the pH up, which is the other thing good that ionizers do, let's just use natural minerals. And now the water's in a more natural state.
Yeah, which is what our body needs and expects, right? Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So again, whether it's Kangen or Life or these other ionizers, they do structure the water, but they use electricity. They're very expensive. They do not take toxins out of the water. You would still have to invest in a purification system. So for those reasons, we have chosen not to sell them.
Very good. Well, that was thank you for indulging me on that member question, and thank you very much for our talk today on water. Just like on air, I see them as being very similar in terms of you need to take a holistic approach to your health, which includes really looking at your water source and what you're doing to protect yourself and your family by detoxifying your water, eliminating the particles and the pollutants, and you have some fantastic products there in a variety of price ranges that like the test you did, they just work, right? They're effective, and it's not based on any kind of someone just saying something or any kind of marketing, and we know that these products actually do work.
It's been a blessing, and there is something very special about working with Aquaspace. Just from a pure business point of view, we stopped selling an air product because we saw that the manufacturer was really becoming greedy, and it wasn't about customers' health at all. And then we've got a company like Aquaspace where it's not about their bottom line; it's about doing what's right. He has shared with me where he has consulted, and he's probably one of the top 2 or 3 people, definitely in North America, on water. Like, he is that brilliant. And he's been asked to develop things for other companies. And the first time this happened, they said to him, and by the way, if it works, that's just a blessing. And he has shared that with me. And then he saw that was the norm in the industry. Companies don't care if claims are made and met. And that's why we're at peace with this company. There's a beautiful component to it, an integrity. It works phenomenal, and there's something there for everybody, no matter their price budget, right? And that's awesome.
Well, it fits in beautifully with your Purahome philosophy. It's really to help people to be healthy and being aware of products and being available with having products actually work and having different price points, right? And the fact that you really care about your customers and you take the time to explain how they work and the science behind it. I think that's one thing that is lacking these days in general. Show me the facts, show me the science, have different perspectives. And the fact that you're able to do that and take the time to do that, I think is a testament to the brands that you carry and the philosophy of your company.
David, thank you. And if I may, we talked about science and facts. 2 very quick ones. We had a young girl, 25, trying to graduate college, migraines every day, and she was drinking from a water pitcher, and it was Brita, right? And that turns the water acidic. So we switched her to Aquaspace, and she went and got CAT scans done on her head. She's been to neurologists. They weren't able to help her. So we switched her from Brita to Aquaspace Craft, and we grounded her bed, earthing, and she was migraine free in 2 days. Like, she lacked minerals, she lacked charge. I just thought of another beautiful customer who we pulled out his reverse osmosis system, right? Drinking acidic water, which is what this shows. Converted, just installed Aquaspace drinking, and it was amazing. One of those special moments. He came in just 2 days later to say that he couldn't believe the difference in his urinary flow. He was probably in his late or early 70s, right? And these are the things that keep us going. It's about health.
Exactly. It's exactly about health. And the nice thing is the human body, even though it takes a lot of abuse, it's quick to heal itself when you give it a chance, right? Like you just said, a couple of examples within 2 days was healed. So amazing. Mario, thank you so much. It's always a pleasure to talk with you. I know our next conversation is going to be maybe even more interesting on EMF protection, what it is and what's going on in the world today with 5G. And I just read an article about 6G yesterday. So, and what we can do to protect ourselves from that. So far we're trying to protect ourselves with having clean air, clean water, and then now we're talking about next up will be EMF protection. So thank you very much.
David, thank you. And for your group too, Amy, who works here, she set up a code. So if anybody's interested online, they can enter the code SSUYOU for self-sufficient you, and there's a discount. Obviously, people can call us or just visit our website. We'll do our best to educate.
Thank you very much for that. We really appreciate the collaboration with our community.
Oh, it's a pleasure. It really is a pleasure to serve people like you, sincerely. Thank you.
Thanks again, Mario, and we'll talk to you again soon.
Thanks, David.